Why is Juan Soto so desperate to convince the MLB community that he didn't choose the Mets for the money? When we all know the Mets were literally chosen because they were the highest bidder. Nobody was going to touch 765 million. The Yankees were the closest with 760, but they had a year more to the contract, so the annual, average value would be a little bit less. And then the Mets went on to make a couple incentives, a couple options for Juan Soto's contract to be up to 805 million depending how he performs. So nobody was gonna touch even the possibility of giving Juan Soto 800 million but the New York Mets. And he came out and said the Yankees were number one from day one, but I know the Yankees are going to be good for the next 5-6 years. We don't know after that. He's obviously saying that because he wants to sign a 15-year deal, before free agency. So Juan Soto coming out in multiple platforms saying that, oh no, the Mets, they weren't the highest bidder. He comes out onto this podcast saying, oh, the Mets weren't the team that offered the most money actually, and then they leave it on a cliffhanger. He doesn't want to reveal the team yet. But in reality, we all know the Mets were the team that offered the most money. He's coming out with excuses like, oh, the Yankees, man, they're great and all for the next 5-6 years, but after that, I don't know how the future is going to be looking like, as if the Mets roster is built for the next 10 years. It's really not. The Yankees roster is younger. The players that are younger are better. When it comes to, the plans for the future, the Yankees got it a lot better. This is why. If we look at the Mets here, when it comes to pitching, their starting pitching is Griffin Canning, 28 years old, scrub. All right, scrub. He won't be in the Mets in 2 years. Edwin Diaz, their closer, 31 years old. Maybe he could play another 5-6 years, but after that, we don't know what's going to be going on there. Clay Holmes, day one starter, Yankees reject, 31 years old. He is not going to have a great year, I'll tell you that much, and he won't be on the Mets in 2 years' time as well. Sean Manaea is already injured, signed a big contract, 33 years old. I'm not sure if that's, a signing for the future. He was the ace last season, but heading into the playoffs, but somehow this is going to be a player that's going to factor in after 5-6 years, according to Juan Soto's decision-making in free agency. Kodai Senga, 32 years old. Oh, yeah, he's going to be there in 5-6 years. Definitely going to be there. A lot of the rotation for the Mets is weak and older, so I don't understand compared to the Yankees one, because, if you compare it here, you got obviously Garrett Cole. He's kind of up there in age, getting a Tommy John injury. I'll give you that one. They just signed, Max here, 31 years old. He's going to be here for the next 4 or 5 years, I believe, pitching at a decent level. But you got Clayton Beeter here, 26 years old. Now, that's a guy that I could see for the future being a starter. If you know ball, he's a great prospect. I believe he's going to end up breaking into rotation in a year or two time, and he's going to be great. Will Warren, young pitcher, 25 years old. He has the makings of being what Luis Hill was last season. Luis Hill was rookie of the year, and then you got Luis Hill, who is literally the rookie of the year. So you've got young arms here that could be starters in 5-6 years, and push, forward into the future. And Juan Soto's not looking at that when it comes to pitching. So when it comes to the lineup itself, you do have Alvarez who's young. You do have, Acuna who's young. But aside from that, Pete Alonso's on a 1-year deal, basically prove-it deal, try to get a big contract in the next offseason. Brett Beatty, aside from spring training, he's kind of a scrub. But yeah, he is a younger guy. Francisco Lindor is 31 years old, a year younger, if that, than Aaron Judge. And if anybody were to bet who's going to have more longevity, it's going to be Aaron Judge over Francisco Lindor. And who's the better player right now and who's been the better player? Aaron Judge, okay? So I don't understand, some of these excuses that Juan Soto tries to, put on everyone and dismay everyone from thinking that he didn't choose the Mets for the money, man. Because, look, Jeff McNeil, 32 years old. Mark Vientos, I'll give you that. He's a young star. He'll be the one guy there with Juan Soto and, in past 6-7 years. Because you look at the outfield, Starling Marte, 36 years old. Brandon Nimmo, 31 years old. Siri, 29. Tyron Taylor, 31. Jesse Winker, 31. These guys are early 30s. Early 30s, mid 30s, If you come look at the Yankee stars, Austin Wells, that's a young star. You've got Oswaldo Cabrera, he's young. Jazz Chisholm, he's a younger star. Obviously Goldschmidt and LeMahieu are older. Ben Rice, after Goldschmidt, is past his year 1 year deal, he could take over the first base spot. He's 26 years old. Volpe, 23-year-old shortstop. 8 years younger than Lindor, and you never know. He could probably play at the level of Lindor at Lindor's age. You never know. I was thinking about the future. Cody Bellinger, not even 30 years old. Jason Dominguez, 22 years old. Aaron Judge obviously is gonna have a nice little. I feel like he has 7 good years in him, 6, 7 good years in him. Kind of have like a Stanton type career in a sense where he's still an elite hitter at 35 years old. When you're going up, we saw last year in the playoffs, he was literally the most dangerous hitter in the league, man. Everyone feared pitching against him. He had a historic October. So when he tries to say, the Yankees were number one, but we don't know where they're going to be in the next 5, 6 years. That's absolutely blasphemous, because I can guarantee you right now, I could put my life savings on it that in 5, 6 years time, the New York Yankees will have a better future than the Mets. We've seen the Mets go on a crazy drought of being a bad team. But the New York Yankees, it doesn't really occur, man. When we seen they went 82-80, right? The New York Yankees, they didn't do well, and they went out and traded for Juan Soto. They went out and traded for you in response and made the World Series. That shows that the Yankees don't really tolerate mediocrity. They don't, they can't stand it as much as the Mets. The Mets can go 4 years straight without making the playoffs before making another move. The Yankees, 1 year, the next offseason, they'll make a move to be competitive again. Yes, I'll admit that the Yankees sometimes lack that, that ability of not being merciless, because sometimes they'll just be competitive and they'll be adequate. Like this season, the Yankees, they have been competitive and they're adequate with it. They could have got out and made a trade for Kyle Tucker, could have gone out and got, Corbin Burns. They could have out and been merciless, but instead they were, they were adequate. They were content with what they have, and they feel like they have the answers within. They'll go out and get a Ryan Yarbrough, but at the end of the day, they will be more competitive than the Mets throughout Juan Soto's contract with the Mets. And if it isn't money, and you actually passed up on more money from the Yankees from the Mets, that was a really bad decision, man, because it's the same. They're in the same state, and the Yankees will have a better future, guaranteed, with or without Soto. But anyways, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more videos. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about Juan Soto's comments and the attention he's trying to show to everyone, and the point he's trying to make of that he didn't sign to the Mets because of the money? Do you think that's true, or do you think that's false? But anyways, thank you guys for watching.